All right, I'm recording us and getting us started. Welcome everybody to Open Rules for Cataloging, our update that we're giving today. We are pleased that so many of you could join us. We have a big crowd today. I'm Ann Cardos, a metadata librarian at University of Massachusetts Amherst, and I'm one of the co-leaders of this project. We have a lot to share today, so I'm going to start with some gentle housekeeping notes before we dive in. So we would like to ask that you all remain muted for the duration of the presentation. If you have any questions as we go, feel free to put them in the chat. We're monitoring the chat. We can go through all the questions at the end and answer them. There are a lot of you here today. We had 140 people registered for this webinar. So if possible, even at the end of the presentations, if you could put into chat, if you'd like to be unmuted to ask your question, that's fine. We're happy to call on you to speak, but I'm afraid with so many people, we'll miss raised hands. So if you could just please put that into chat as well. We will happily call on you because we are really excited to celebrate this great community. I am going to quickly introduce all of us here today. The members of the ORC core community, we're the people who are making this happen right now. We have Lloyd Chittenden from Marmot Library Network, Amy Hitchner at the Colorado State Library, and she is also helping me monitor chat and letting all of you in today to the webinar. Julie Moore from California State University, Fresno, Sarah Timer at University of New Hampshire, and Jennifer Weston from Equinox Open Library Initiative. And our presenters today are Faye Leibowitz, formerly of the University of Pittsburgh, and Denise Sufi from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So thank you, Faye and Denise, for presenting today. I am going to stop my share and turn it over to Faye.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay. There are currently 2 ORC working committees. There's a platform committee, which Denise will talk about after I'm finished. And there's a cataloging rules committee. You've already been introduced to the cataloging rules subcommittee. But we also have an external review board who review our initial sets of rules and provide feedback. And our review board consists of Bobby Bothman, who is a professor and the catalog and metadata librarian and library services, Minnesota State University, Mankato. He is also an adjunct instructor at the School of Information Science at the University of Illinois. We have Sasha Frizzell. Sasha is the catalog metadata management librarian at Binghamton University. We have Nancy George, who is the cataloging services coordinator at RAILS, which stands for Reaching Across Illinois Library System. We also have Gretchen Nyhart, who is a metadata and digital projects librarian at the Galter Health Science Library and Learning Center, Feinberg School of Medicine, Northwestern University. And we have Allie Rattler, who is a technical services librarian at the Pauline Whitaker Library at Northwest Arkansas Community College. So you can see that we have a pretty diverse group of cataloging professionals who represent a wide range of library types, including many perspectives and work environments. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of developing rules. The Rules Subcommittee begins our work by compiling spreadsheets. Okay, here is an example of a spreadsheet. You can see across the top, we have various sources that we consult. Okay, we have on this little snippet, we show BibFrame, we show Rules for Descriptive Cataloging in the Library of Congress, which was published in 1949. We have MRIs, which are rule interpretations developed by Michael Gorman and Mac Elrod. Michael Gorman was kind enough to let us use his rule interpretations in our project, and the late Mac Elrod's son was also kind enough to agree to that. We have LCRIs, and not included in here, we also have Cutter's principles, we have AACR2, we have RDA, and we have ISBD. So we check a lot of different sources.
Hey, Faye, can I jump in? Can I jump in you a second? Is there a way you could make that window a little bit larger?
I tried, and it gets fuzzy because it's an image. It's not an actual spreadsheet.
Okay. We're just having some folks having trouble seeing what's on the screen.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry about that, but I'll try to get a better one and maybe send it out later for people to look at.
All right, thanks.
Okay, after reviewing, so these established cataloging codes are the basis of our decision-making process. The fact that a cataloging concept is universal across cataloging codes throughout time gives us the precedent for including it in ORC. The text of public domain rules or definitions can potentially be used as published, but usually we update the rules and modernize the text. We will never use the text of a copyrighted publication as an ORC rule. After we review our selected cataloging sources, we decided that we would focus on the rules as described in the Rules for Descriptive Cataloging in the Library of Congress from 1949. This document is available in the public domain in the United States through Hathi. It formed the basis for the development of AACR2, so we decided it would be a good jumping off point for ORC. If we didn't find information that we needed in that code, we consulted other codes. We actually do consult all of them, but we focus on that particular cataloging code. We formalized a schedule for rule development and review by various constituencies. I'm going to show you the process. Okay, so these are the stages for reviewing rules. Okay, so first we develop our spreadsheet. After the spreadsheet is completed, the platform committee converts it into a document. The first stage for reviewing the document is that the Rules Subcommittee spends 5 to 6 weeks looking at it, which is about 2 meeting cycles. At the second meeting, the rules creators may respond and or ask questions, because initially we did have usually one person working on each spreadsheet. Now it's a little bit more distributed to various members, but we discuss it for 2 meeting cycles. The next stage is that the rules that have been reviewed go to the core committee. That committee has 3 to 4 weeks to review the document and comment on the rules. At the second meeting, the members of the rules subcommittee may respond and or ask questions. And then the changes are finalized for that stage. The next stage is the board of reviewers. And that can take 10 to 12 weeks. They have actually 1 month to review the rules and comment on them. Then the rules subcommittee has 2 meeting cycles to respond and or ask questions about, we can ask questions to the board of reviewers about their comments. What they do is they have access to the document, the cataloging rule document, and they can submit comments in the Google document. So then we review their comments, and we may incorporate some of what they say and we may not. And then we have 2 weeks to finalize any changes. The next step is that we send the document out to you, the ORC community. And this stage takes 3 to 4 months. The rules will be uploaded to a website so that formatting can be evaluated in addition to the content, because that's an important factor also, is how it looks and how usable it is on the web. A mechanism for providing comments will be provided. Then the ORC community will be notified after step 3 is complete and will have 2 to 3 months to comment. The rules subcommittee has 2 meeting cycles to respond and or ask questions. And then we have an additional 2 weeks to finalize any changes. After that, the rules will be published. So we do have a definite structure, although sometimes if we need extra time, sometimes there are holidays, sometimes something gets really intense in terms of discussing a rule. So we don't always stick 100% to that schedule, but we try to do the best we can. In some cases, cataloging concepts are significantly modified from the original version. The text of original cataloging rules presented in our spreadsheets are the inspiration for ORC rules. So we will document them as sources, even if they're significantly altered. All sources of ORC rules are noted in our database to provide confidence to ORC users that these concepts have precedent. We don't make things up from nowhere. Every concept in our rules is a concept that's represented throughout time, going back to the 1800s all the way up to 2023. Okay, I am going to show you an example of the review process, how a rule changes over time. Okay, so this is an example of the history of rule number 060200, parallel title of a series or multi-part monographic resource. First, I'd like to talk about our numbering system. We decided to use a numbering system which could potentially be used to identify a specific URL for each concept, for each rule, in a hierarchical way. For example, in this rule number, 06 identifies a series rule. 02 is the second highest level category within the series rule, which is a parallel title rule. 060100 was the first high level category, which was the series title. And then we have some spaces available for sub rules in case we need them. 2 digits. And we decided that it might be good for us to have unique URLs for each rules at some point, because when you're training somebody or when you're teaching somebody cataloging, it's good to be able to bring up a specific rule and have some type of a hierarchy to be able to identify the rules. Okay, so this rule, you can see that there is a source for this rule. Okay, the source for this rule is the 1949 rules that we talked about, that we prioritize. Okay, here is that rule. The rule says, if the series title appears in more than one language, one of which agrees with the title of the monograph, this title is chosen for the series note. Originally, this was pretty much taken from that code. As is, I changed it a little bit. I took out the words of the monograph to make the rule more general, and I took out the word note to make the statement more modern, to make a series more general than a note. Okay, but the rule is, if the series title appears in more than one language, one of which agrees with the title is chosen for the series. We also include mark-coded examples for each of the rules. We decided that there are prophecies about mark going away at some point, but at this point, most people are still in a mark environment, and we think it's helpful to code our examples in mark for that reason. On July 11, 22, this rule was revisited. And what happened is, information from LCRI 1.6c, parallel title of series, was added. That LCRI says, after recording the title proper, give the first parallel title and any subsequent parallel title in English. We added, after recording the title proper of the series, give the first parallel title and any subsequent parallel title in English. Okay, we still only have the one example there too. Then August 16, 2022, the rule hasn't changed, but we added another example. Here's an example of the first parallel title in English being added. And we have another example. This example includes numbering, series numbering, and an ISSN. Then, May 18th, 2023, this was after the review board made comments. And we did a little bit more modification. At this point, we were asked to change the way this is phrased because it wasn't clear. We agreed. So we changed the way it was phrased. Now it says, if the series title appears in more than one language, choose the same language as the title proper for the series title. If the resource being cataloged has series titles, now we also made a really major change here based on the fact that we no longer want to prioritize English examples in English language in the cataloging, because we want the code to be a little more universal than that. So we took out the part about prioritizing an English parallel title, and we say, if the resource being cataloged has series titles in 2 or more languages, record all parallel series titles deemed necessary. Optionally, add a note describing the languages of the recorded parallel series titles in the order that they appear. So we are relying a lot on catalogers' judgment and customization of rules, because we believe that people do need guidelines, but they also need to be able to adapt the guidelines to their particular situation. And that's why we're trying to build a little flexibility into these rules. What an academic library needs might not be the same as what a public library needs or a school library. And we're trying to take into consideration all of our potential catalogers that would be using these rules. Okay, so you can see how this rule evolved. I think it was about a year since we started, and then we finally came up with this fairly recently. And as you can see, we have a very thorough process of discussing and analyzing every rule. We are all experienced catalogers, so we make decisions based on our practical experience. We are also library users, so we also look at cataloging as a service to library users. Therefore, end user search approaches and access needs in an online search environment are also considered in our decision making. Okay, we also felt that maybe that parallel title rule had to do with limitations relating to catalog cards. And that's not really an issue anymore for most libraries. But if it is, people can add fewer parallel titles. And if they want more parallel titles, they can add them if they're in an online environment and have the time. Our rules take into account the fact that what works for one library may not work for another library. So we allow for local customization based on catalogers' judgment when necessary. Basic standards are important, but those standards need to be broad enough to allow for local decision making. The final stage of review involves sharing the document with you, the ORC committee. Some of the comments that we receive at each stage of the process are incorporated into the document, but others are not. The rules subcommittee discussion at each stage of review by each constituency is just as thorough as the initial discussion of the rules. We plan to incorporate a mechanism within the database for the user community to make suggestions or add examples. When presented with evidence that a rule isn't working, we will evaluate it and change it. We don't have plans for regular updates just for the sake of updating. We hope to have some type of ability to save versions so that the history of changes to rules can be preserved. And if any of the rules subcommittee members have anything to add or correct, please speak up now.
I just want to thank you, Faye, for taking everybody through our process. As you can see, sometimes it really does take quite a lot of discussion, and we really appreciate the feedback that our reviewers give us, because it often causes us to discuss further how something might be interpreted, both from a cataloger perspective and from an end user perspective. So thank you to all of our reviewers who have been very thorough in their feedback.
I think Denise can talk a little about the platform committee.
I think if you stop sharing your screen.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's all right. And then I'll be able to share mine. Okay. All right. Thank you, Faye, for that summary of the rules development, and thank you to everyone in the Rules Committee for all their hard work. I'm going to tell you a bit about the work of the Platform Committee, which includes myself and Jennifer Weston, Product and Education Specialist at Equinox Open Library Initiative. Last year, we met with some of the people who developed the DCRMR website. And not only did they give us some great advice, they also graciously allowed us to clone their GitHub site so that a lot of the work building our website would be done for us. We are using minimal mistakes Jekyll theme, which provides the template. The site is being hosted for free on GitHub pages while the rules are in the process of development. But in the future, we plan to pay for a domain name for the publication of the official ORC rules. Much of our work has involved changing colors and fonts so that our site will have a different look from the DCRMR site. We're using an open source Google font called Noto Sans, which has an open, easy to read design and accommodates a wide range of languages and scripts so that we can include non-English language examples and maybe even host a translation of ORC in the future. The colors have been tested for contrast and accessibility. We've also been altering the website structure to better fit ORC needs. Before I start showing you the website, I'd like to showcase the fantastic logo created by Jeff Edmonds, who is the Digital Access Coordinator in Cataloging and Metadata Services at Pennsylvania State University. He created this small version for our website and a larger version for use on future swag. And this has been credited in the footer of the site. Get down here. There we are. We've got the credit down here. So right now you are viewing our homepage, which gives an overview of the project. And then if I go to our About page, we have a short history. And you can see that this section also includes our vision and scope, as well as lists of the core committee members, past and present, and the board of reviewers. I'll just click on the core committee members page. So you can see there, we've got our past and our present members. With the exception of the series page, the other pages don't have any text yet, and their final structure is still in the process of development. You can see here in our table of contents that we've adopted roughly the areas of description from ISBD. They are not exactly the same. They're a little bit similar to DCRMR, but again, not exactly the same. But the general idea is there. So now let's take a look at our series page. You can see we have it clearly marked as a draft. And there is a link to a feedback form, which I'll show you in a moment. Next, we have the definition of a series in plain language, followed by links to each of the elements under contents. Each element includes a definition and its sources, and a rule and its sources, the relevant mark field, and examples in mark. So let's take a look. Let's go to the one that Faye showed you. So parallel title. So here you can see we have our definition and we have the source of that definition. We have a rule, and then we have the sources for that rule. And then we have the mark field and examples. All the sources are out of copyright or open source, as Faye mentioned, and links are provided for both the sources and the mark field. Clicking on them will open up a new tab. At the end of every rule, there's a link to take you back to the table of contents. So now let's take a look at the feedback form. So clicking on this link will take you to a Google form, and you can see in the instructions that we're asking you to evaluate each rule with several questions in mind, such as, is the rule clear and easy to understand and apply? Are there exceptions to or problematic examples of the rule that need to be clarified? Do the examples listed cover the range of the rule? And do the links work? And of course, anything else that you find that you'd like to comment on, we welcome that. So if we go down this form, putting your name and email is optional. This is in case the rules subcommittee would like to contact you about your comments if they have questions, but if you don't want to be contacted, you certainly don't have to put your email. And then we have questions about the color and fonts. And if you have any other comments about the website, we're happy to take them, with the caveat that Jennifer and I are not website developers. So we can try to implement some of your comments, but if we're not able to, we just won't be able to do it until we have somebody volunteer who has more expertise in that area. And then we have space to put a comment on each rule separately. The deadline for providing feedback is August 31st. We would love to hear from all you. The more feedback we have, the better we can make these rules, the better we can make our examples. If you spot any mistakes, we want to know, we want to fix them. Now to end my portion of this talk, I'd just like to share the good news that we are now officially incorporated as a nonprofit organization. And I'm going to turn it over to Anne to explain that further.
Hey, Denise, can you stop your share?
Yeah, that's what I am trying to do here. There we go.
Oh, thanks. Hold on. All right. Okay. So, as Denise just said, we're a nonprofit. Denise did a bunch of work to file the paperwork for that earlier this year. But we really want to express to all of you that turning Open Rules for cataloging into a fully functioning nonprofit is going to take a lot more work, and we do need help. Oops. Here we go. After this webinar, I'm going to be sending out an email, so please be on the lookout for that. It'll be from me to the Google group, and we're asking for volunteers for our first board of directors. We need 2 to 4 volunteers, ideally, to serve with Faye on our initial board for approximately 1 year. And it would be beginning relatively soon, on or around July 1st, or when people become available, hopefully soon. Our board of directors will mostly be responsible for formulating our bylaws. So if you have a passion for bylaws, please nominate yourself. We have a great template to get started, but there are details that need to be sorted out to get things up and running. Aside from our bylaws, the board will also be responsible for organizing our first elections and overseeing our application for federal nonprofit status. We do know that many of you who follow ORC are really passionate about these rules becoming a force for change. So we would really like to ask you to consider volunteering to help us meet our next milestones. The email that I'll send out after the webinar will point you to some more information, and we have an application to apply. Additionally, we would also love to recruit a few more volunteers to help out on the rules and platform subcommittees. Faye demonstrated our process, and Denise just showed you all the work that's done on the website, and it's done by a pretty small group of us. I think there's 6 of us or 7 of us. It takes a lot of work to write rules because we research so many sources, and Denise and Jennifer are doing so much work on the website. So if you're interested in researching and writing clear and understandable rules for cataloging, you can volunteer for the rules subcommittee. If you have GitHub or website programming experience, we're also looking for you. I know Denise just made a plug just said something about that at the end of her talk. So we would ask you to please consider volunteering for the platform subgroup if you have any of that kind of experience. The email that I send out will also tell you how to volunteer for either the rules or the platform subcommittee if you're interested. So I think with that, we're ready to take your questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll go from there. And Amy, I don't know if there's anything that we can start with in chat.
Well, I feel like we have been sort of taking questions in chat as they come, like answering them within chat. But if there's anybody who didn't get their question answered in chat and would like to throw something else in there or just say that they'd like to unmute, just go ahead, put in chat that you want to talk or that you have another question. We've been having a fun discussion over there. We've been getting some feedback along the way about the rules themselves, the series rules, which is great. And just remember that you'll have additional ways to provide feedback that Denise described. Okay, we've got some stuff coming.
Some questions.
Yay. Okay, what are your goals for the next 6 to 12 months? That is a great question. I'll start off by saying we have so many more rules to work on. Like you just saw series, we are right in the middle of working through title, which is huge, but we've got a lot of rules yet to go. And then of course there's all the work involved with the nonprofit. So does anyone else want to jump in and talk about goals for the next 6 to 12 months?
I'll just say, I think the nonprofit is a big goal. Getting things up and running. The open rules for cataloging was incorporated as a non-stock corporation in the state of Delaware in late April. And we have 15 months to apply for federal nonprofit status. This is not something that the board of directors has to actually do. They just need to oversee it. I'm still working on some other aspects of the nonprofit paperwork and business side of things, but we really need several people to be overseeing everything. And one of the important pieces for applying for federal nonprofit status is to have our bylaws ready. And so this is a huge thing. Once we can have all that set up, we can start, having some other things working. I have been kind of keeping track of, what we would need for a budget. We're obviously going to try and keep it pretty low. And so eventually there'll have to be some consideration about maybe getting some grant funding to help us out. But for now we're just trying to get all the paperwork set up. So I think that's a really big goal for the next 6 to 12 months. And it's definitely not something that one or two of us who are trying to take care of many other things can do on our own.
Just a comment about the bylaws. We have a really good template. So it's not like we're going to be starting from total scratch. So if anyone's interested in volunteering, you have a pretty good template to start with. It's just we have to decide things like which committees will we have, or how many officers will we have, things like that. But the text of the bylaws, there's already a really extensive template that we can start with.
Okay, we have another question. What guidelines, if any, do you have for writing or communicating changes to the ORC Rules Committee beyond this initial writing and publication process? I think, Denise, you touched on that a little bit, but do you want to talk a little bit more about that or revisit it?
So initially, we're providing Google Forms for each set of rules as it's completed. We are thinking about what we want to do for the future. Probably when the rules are published, to have a much more like general feedback mechanism. We haven't decided yet. It could be a Google form. We have an email, like a general ORC email. So it may just be a link to that email account. But we are planning on having something more general, just hasn't been decided on yet.
And also we're hoping that we'll be able to archive, like have versions available so that if someone wants to see the history of the rule. I think also that, I'm not sure how we're going to be able to, release. I don't think we're going to have any kind of LCRI type releases of when we start, update a rule or something. I don't know technically how we would do that. If there's a way to send out emails or something from the, automatically generate something every time the database is updated. I don't know if people would even want that. I think it's going to be more like, a database where changes happen, but maybe everybody doesn't always know that all the changes happen. I don't know. I'm not sure yet.
And it looks like we also have some suggestions for how that has been done in another project. So we're definitely keeping notes of all these comments so that we can talk about them at future meetings. So thank you for all your comments, everybody. Another question, when do you foresee a fully functional site? I don't know, what do you have going on in 2030? I'm kidding, of course. Now that we're kind of we've got like a rhythm and everything, it's going, it's clipping along a little bit faster, I think, but any ideas from the crew about projected timelines?
I think it depends a lot on getting more volunteers. If we
Yeah.
have enough volunteers to set up a second team to work on a rule, so we could have two groups working on two different rules at the same time or something like that. I think that would make it possible to move a lot faster.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lloyd. Just going through the process with the series rules, you go through them and you think that they're looking good, and then you get feedback, and then you've got to revisit them again, and then stuff pops up that you didn't notice the first time, and then there's like a third or fourth review. So it does take a long time for each section. So it would be great to have 2 or maybe even 3 rule groups running in parallel.
Yeah, I was just going to say we are running this on a pretty small team of people. So it's a pretty grassroots project. And if it's something that people are passionate about, we do need more help.
Mm-hmm.
I think when Amber Billy initially started this project, came up with the idea for this project several years ago, I think one of her mottos was cataloging rules by catalogers for catalogers. So if catalogers want these rules, they have to help put them together and maintain them. And, it's definitely a grassroots type of an operation.
Okay, we have another question. Once the ORC is published, any indication of internationalization of them? Will there be translations to other languages? That would be great. Anybody want to comment on that?
Well, as I mentioned, we tried to de-emphasize English. We're trying to include examples that are not English. So we're hoping that it'll be a universal set of rules. But it'll be up. We're hoping to publish it open access so that anyone can come in and translate it if they'd like.
Any other questions? I feel like Maybe did I miss anybody's? I don't think so. But if there are any other lingering questions, please feel free to throw them in chat. Oh, I think we have some more.
We have a comment telling us that all of us are wonderful. So thank you.
We'll take it.
That makes our day. Thank you so much.
Okay, here's a question. Is it intended to be extensible to maps, rare materials, etc.? I think right now we are primarily focused on those materials that would be the most common. But we have talked about expanding out as well, but we really want to take care of the majority of cataloging needs for the majority of catalogers. Does anyone want to comment on that?
Sure, I'll add something to that. I know when Amber started this project that the intention was to first get cataloging rules out there for monographs, and then extend to other materials, but only those materials for which there are not open source rules. So for example, we're not going to do rare materials because this is available through the DCRM suite. You know, this is something that we definitely have on our minds. Whether or not we actually do it is kind of going to be up to the community. If the community wants these kinds of rules, then yeah, we'll work on those.
Okay, we have a request to share the Git URL. And you're going to send that out in the email, Anne?
I can do so. Yes.
Okay, that would be great. Okay, Bobby wants to know if we're going to get a MARC code for the 040 subfield E. I don't know. It'd be great. I don't think, has the committee ever talked about that? I don't remember talking about it, but it would be great.
We'd have to look up what the process is for doing that. Maybe at the point we actually publish it and it's available to everybody to really use, or shortly before we're going to do that.
I'm definitely writing it down though, so we can remember it for future work. Okay. What guideline? Oh, do we already have that? Oh yeah, we already talked about that. Anything else? Okay, Adam put to just email, he put an email address in there to get a code. So I will document that. Okay, another question. Aside from those mentioned in the scope section of your GitHub site, what are some overarching principles that the rules subcommittee will refer to help with decision making?
Well, I think it's just that we try to find precedents so that people have confidence in the rules, that we're evaluating previous sets of rules going way back up till the present. Some of our other values, one thing I was going to mention is we're trying to make the rules accessible. So we're looking at fonts and things like that, that are more accessible fonts and colors and things like that for our database. If there's anything specific that you're interested in, you know, we want something universal.
Yeah, we have on our GitHub site our principles, which are generally the same as the IFLA Statement of International Cataloging Principles, with a few modifications, and I need to put that on the website. I should have done that before today, and it kind of slipped But it's not that they're not available. They're on our ORC wiki, which you all should have the link to. But if you don't worry about it. I'm gonna get it up on the GitHub Pages site, so it'll be there.
And Julie also mentioned the cataloging code of ethics. That's another set of principles that we are aware of.
Yes, we do have that mentioned in our list of principles. So one of the last ones is accessibility, which mentions about complying accessibility, like the access to bibliographic and authority data should comply with international standards for accessibility, as recommended in the IFLA Code of Ethics, but also the Cataloging Code of Ethics. So we have made use of that. I know the Rules Committee has made use of that as justification for some of their rules.
And when you review the rules, if you see anything and from that aspect that needs to be improved, let us know too.
Okay, another question. Has the committee considered adding other coding examples in addition to MARC, like bib frame, in the future? I think, like a lot of these questions, if we have help to do it, I don't think anyone's opposed to it, but we're focusing right now on MARC because that's what the majority of people are still cataloging in. But we're not opposed to adding additional coding examples if we have folks join who have the capability and want to help us with that. Okay, and then another question, formulating access points. Will this be covered? So are we going to talk about formulating access points? Or will you rely on the LC NACO authority file, which follows RDA for construction of access points?
We're going to include a section in our introduction or in like a separate section of the rules relating to access points. We are going to focus on like the VOF, Virtual International Authority file, direct people to that. And maybe some very basic rules relating to establishing names that aren't available in other databases, but we're not going to focus on it because that's a very complicated area of cataloging. And I think a lot of names are already available. The ones that aren't, hopefully we'll be able to give general enough rules for someone to come up with something basic.
I don't know that we'd be opposed to dealing with that in the future, though. I mean, that's going to be that would be a future expansion possibility, but not something we're dealing with right now.
Okay, and question about how about LRM? And yes, VOF helps indeed. Anybody have comments about LRM?
We don't really have a conceptual model. We're basically creating a set of rules. We don't really have a conceptual model for it.
We're trying to be practical rather than philosophical.
Lloyd, I couldn't hear you. Could you say that a little bit louder?
I said we're trying to be practical rather than philosophical in regards to the LRM.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to read this question. I'm a little unclear as to how to interpret. So have discussion with OCLC. Oh, has discussion with OCLC commenced on adding records to OCLC using this code? We don't have a code yet, I don't think. So no. Okay, so someone's asked, okay, Adam's asking, so will linked data be possible?
I think it probably will. I mean, we'll be able to have a URI for individual rules. And like we mentioned before, our rules are based on universal concepts. So they could be linked to similar concepts from other cataloging codes.
Okay, will there be an ORC metadata application profile eventually? Are you talking about a metadata application profile in the context of RDA? I'll probably need more information about that. Okay, and Adam, if you want, I think maybe if you have more questions about URIs and linked data and stuff, why don't you contact us directly? Because I'm not sure that we have the
Yeah.
answers you're looking for like right now.
I'm just thinking of once you get outside of MARC, if you wanted to catalog using ORC for and outside of a MARC environment, you need to be able to say title, title equals this, or whatever your properties are, title proper, series title proper, and you need to be able to have URIs for each of those things
Mhm.
with, to say this has this value, etc. So I think you might actually need a conceptual model for linked data to work.
It's definitely something to think about. I know that one of the reasons that a lot of people joined this group is to kind of get away from the extreme modeling in RDA and kind of re-simplify. So we would have to talk about what that would mean.
And if you have ideas about how we can do it, let us know what would be involved, and we'll be happy to think about it.
I think IFLA has already done some of this for the ISBD, where they had the various areas and elements, bibliographic descriptive elements. So you could look at IFLA.
Mhm. Okay, and then Jennifer's put in some more information about metadata application profiles for future discussion. So a lot of flurry of activity happening in chat here at the very end. More about ontologies, suggesting a super simple ontology that would follow the outline of the left-hand menu on the ORC screen. So maybe there's a way to sort of work those two things together. Okay. So we're kind of coming up to the end of the hour here. Anne, is there anything you want to close with? You're muted.
Sorry, I had other screens up that I was like following along with some of the chat. Oh my gosh. So I think we'll just thank everyone for coming, because we appreciate seeing so many people here and feeling the excitement. There was so much going on in chat that we're going to capture all of the links that we've gotten and some of the information. And as I mentioned earlier, everyone will see a couple of emails from me. One will contain a recording of this webinar as well once it's available. And the other message that you'll get is our very important email, which will contain information about volunteering for the first board of directors or joining the core committee to help out in writing the rules or creating the platform. If you are passionate about ORC, please spread the word and consider joining us, because we cannot continue to make ORC amazing without some more help. So thanks, everyone. Thank you for attending. And I hope we will see you all again soon. Thank you. And I think when the recording happens, I'm going to stop the recording now, actually.